Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next lecture on, well, less of a lecture, but more of a talk from the Mentors Guild. And it's about getting better at Monster Hunter and getting past the wall. Now, this one is coming out because in the previous Mentors Guild talk that we did, I talked about on some things where why you weren't really getting better and some of the bad excuses that you were making. And so obviously that one was kind of on a negative note. So this time we're going to be looking at things from more neutral, positive perspective and how to get better at Monster Hunter. And granted, some of the concepts you can take away from this slideshow. Hopefully, you can apply that to other things as well. So, first, why do you want to get better in the first place? Well, first of all, leads to more skill expression, creates more opportunities for memorable moments. Now, for those two, whenever it comes to skill expression, I mean, the better you get, the more things that you're able to do in the game to kind of pop off and show off like the different things that you can do. It adds more stuff that you can do for your toolkit. And as a result, because you can do more things, it creates more moments where you can be like, yeah, this was a fucking awesome moment. And they can happen more consistently as well. So you're able to experience more highs with it. And not only that, but it'll help build your self confidence as well. Because generally, the worse you are at something, the less confident that you feel. So, in order to build that confidence, we get better at whatever we want to do, and as a result, it'll help build it. Um, Sometimes we just need a way to relax, and if you're bad at the game that you're trying to relax with, then you can usually find your sessions to be pretty stressful. And so, by getting better, you'll be able to finally take a breather. Maybe you'll get to the point where you're so good where you could just kind of turn off your brain, have yourself a nice, relaxing Rathalos hunt, and just call it a day. And lastly, if you're playing with friends, you can be the life of the life of the team. You can create a lot of moments where you just end up saving everybody because of your badassery. So those were some reasons why we would want to get better. It's not always because you want to be like a diehard speedrunner. And again, since I am making this from the perspective that I am a speedrunner, I will usually preface this with saying the goal of this is to not turn people into speedrunners. So, just something to keep in mind. Now, some hurdles that prevent us from getting better. Bad days, they happen. Um, Not only that, but overwhelming inexperience, which ends up preventing us from recognizing why we messed up. And as a result, we start to cast blame on other things, which ends up leading to bad excuses like, I didn't have the RNG, my charm is weak, this thing's bullshit, that thing's bullshit, everything is bullshit. In which case, because of those excuses, you just never decide to try to improve upon yourself. Sometimes we are too arrogant at times, and this can happen at any skill level, whether it's the lowest skill level where you think you're a badass at the world because you decided to mod in 2000 or 2000 raw for your weapon, so you just one shot everything, or sometimes you just get really good at the game. There's still moments to improve, but you end up becoming so arrogant at your newfound abilities that you just stop climbing. Not only that, but we also have fixed mindsets that prevent us from getting better. We'll have unclear goals at times, and sometimes we're just playing for too long, so we get really fatigued. So let's go ahead and get on with this first one. So, what do all of these have in common? It's just you. Just like the last Mentors Guild video where I talk about your biggest problem is always going to be you, that's kind of going to be the same theme with this one. We're going to be talking about, well, just kind of ourselves. Because at the end of the day, it's us holding the controller. Not your mom, not your dad, not your pet cat or your pet dog, not your wife or girlfriend. you're the one who's playing the game, unless you handed the controller to them, in which case it's them who's got to go through these aspects. But otherwise, when you're holding the controller, these are the things you got to be thinking about. So first, bad days. Obviously, if you're having a really bad day, you're not going to be performing your best, and it's all right that we have bad days sometimes because that's just life. They just happen. So as a result, if you're having a bad day, try to do something that you really enjoy. And if you're not feeling the doing practice for the grind, then maybe just play with some friends. Just take a walk, do some breathing exercises, some light exercise. Uh, Granted, doing these things will not be a 100% cure for what's ailing you, but sometimes it can help get your mind off the thing that's making you have a bad day. And if not, then it'll at least release some chemicals in your brain to help improve your mood. So, with your breathing exercises and your breathing techniques and your exercises, the reason why we would do those is because, in general, a healthy mind a healthy body will typically promote a healthy mind. That being said, if you do have other underlying things, like let's just say, for example, if you have depression, then I strongly encourage that you go check it out, especially if it's a very prolonged. Well, I'm no therapist, so I would do your best to try and check out a therapist if you're able to. Now, next is just inexperience. I mean, after all, how can you possibly know what you don't know? So, and like I said right here, if you don't know what you don't know, then how can you begin to know how to get better? um, so, inexperience is always a tricky thing because usually we don't know where to even start. And we know that we're inexperienced, but it's more of a subconscious knowing that we're inexperienced. And so the first step we got to realize is that we or you yourself don't have all the answers, and it's perfectly acceptable to ask for help. It's better to ask once and to be a fool at that moment than to never ask and to always be a fool. So remember, it's always okay to ask for help. And second is to go and try to seek help from someone who is knowledgeable or somebody who knows someone who is knowledgeable. Generally, the first step for a lot of players that they tend to do is Reddit. Granted, I don't endorse Reddit, especially at the highest levels of play, because Reddit's Reddit. That's all I can say about that. But, of course, whenever you're trying to look up information, make sure that it is from a reputable source. Generally, players who are very experienced tend to be a good place to start because, for the most part, they'll have some basis on what they're talking about. But here's the biggest thing: popular does not mean reputable. And this creates a big problem to where sometimes a very, very popular person will come out with a video, they'll say something that ends up being factually incorrect. However, what ends up happening is that you have a lot of these people who watch this video, they see that this person has, let's just say, 1 million subscribers. And then they think to themselves, well, shit, if this guy's got 1 million subs, then obviously he must know what he's talking about. Because unfortunately, sometimes we'll accidentally attribute popularity to being successful or being more knowledgeable, which is not always the case. So just something to keep in mind whenever you're looking up your information. And that being said, there's a lot of resources and little nuggets of knowledge that speedrunners or just very experienced players just take for granted that not everybody knows. And some examples for this would be like sharpness modifiers, motion values, HP values, and every other little tiny bit of value that the game has. We forget that a lot of people do not have access to those, or let alone just even know where to begin looking. So here, thanks to Zook, and fabulous hunting horn player, um, he reminded me about this. So here are some links that he put together. So first off, we got Chronico.com. The nice thing about Chronico is that it has kind of been there pretty historically, at least since 3U from my knowledge. I could be wrong. But the link that I'm providing, since this is the current game that we're on, is the Monster Hunter Rise link. So here it'll show you your spawns, your HP values, your various monster modifiers such as their attack, the defense, how much status they need in order for that status to proc, various things like those. And then the next one is the Monster Hunter Rise weapon attack tables. So that way you have an idea as to what things actually deal damage and how these modifiers actually work and everything. So for example, if you thought condensed sum discharge or whatever it's called for Switch X is really, really strong, you'll see on that weapon table on how it's not that strong. And then the next link in the Imgur, if you have not unlocked everything, then those are the quests that you would need to do to unlock all your Switch skills. The next one is the Monster Hunter Rise database. But the particular link that we have right there is to create armor and just to kind of theorize what sort of set you're able to make. So what you would do is you would click on the link. It'll show you a giant list of armor skills, and on one of the tabs you can put in your charms that you have available, and then you go back, you say what skills you want to go for. So let's just say you wanted a set with attack boost 7, weakness exploit 3, rapid morph 3, protective polish 3. And when you click search, it'll show you all of your possible all your possible armor combinations that you can go for. So it's very, very handy to have. And then another one is mhrisebuilder.com. Me personally, I haven't used it, but Zook provided it, so knowing Zook, he knows what he's talking about. And then the last two documents that we have is the first Google document right there for the spreadsheets. That shows you all of your maximum legal charm values. So if you are charm farming on Switch, you can get a better idea on how strong those charms are, as well as what's potentially possible. And then if you're on PC, then you know what values can be maximized, so that way you could put in legal charms. But that being said, the game does have insanity checks, so you can't just make illegal charms unless you're using a mod. But something to keep in mind. And then lastly, the last spreadsheet is all the different things that you can unlock, like all your village quests and what they unlock. And then lastly, I'm also going to provide 3 different speedrun websites. So the first one is mhrspeedrun.com. So this is a giant hub for individual level runs, ranging from Raytheon and then high rank 6 and up. The reason why is, from what I remember, it's just more of a preference thing. And then for me personally, I feel that Raytheon is the most perfectly acceptable monster to get into speedrunning with. It's the one monster where it's not necessarily a pushover, and it provides a good enough challenge without any BS mechanics. And people just generally find Raytheon to be an interesting monster. And honestly, I'd rather hunt 1,000 Raytheons than one Bishaten, but that's just me. So from here, they'll host freestyle and TA wiki rule sets, as well as both submissions from Switch and PC. However, the thing is that whenever they are accepting runs, they will only accept the top 3 run of any given weapon, any rule set. And I think maybe console as well. Don't quote me on that part. But for sure, only top 3 for any weapon and rule set. That being said, all PC runs, though, are considered as unofficial world records, or just unofficial records, just because there are so many things under the hood that cannot be accounted for whenever it comes to checking for cheats and mods. And so as a result of that, PC is considered unofficial, Switch is considered official, but you just run whatever you feel like running. Um, and then next we have the mhrise.wikidatabase.com. So for this one, this is the originator of the TA Wiki rules. Whenever a new Monster Hunter game comes out, everybody comes to this site to see what the rule set is going to be. On this site, of course, in its name case, they only host TA Wiki runs. And they only accept runs from Switch. So I'm sorry, PC users, you can't accept runs here, or you can't submit your runs here. And again, they only showcase the top 3 runs of any given weapon. Now, I will have to say that for both, or the difference between mhrspeedrun.com versus mhrise wiki is that Wiki will accept all HR quests, of course, but MHR Speedrun will show all runs that have been submitted within their top 3s. So, for example, if somebody was 3rd place and then they got bumped down to 4th place, they would still be shown on that leaderboard. However, on mhrise.wiki, if you were 3rd place and then you got bumped down to 4th place, you just get taken off the leaderboard in general. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the last website, which is the one that I actually moderate, is the speedrun.com/MHR board. So this is the main hub for full game speedruns, including Village, Magnum Malo %, Apex Autosaurus %, and Narwhal %. And we also accept IL runs as well, under the TA Wiki rule set and freestyle. But the big thing, though, is that we're actually, as far as I'm aware, now I would love to accept new information for, like, if there's another board out there that actually shows multiplayer runs. But as far as I am aware, that's the big emphasis, as far as I am aware, speedrun.com is the only one that actually accepts multiplayer runs. However, our big caveat is that everyone's got to show their perspective, just for verification purposes. But for the most part, though, the one advantage that our board has, or maybe it's a disadvantage depending on you, is that we accept all runs regardless of where it places. So if you end up placing 12th place, we'll still accept your run, so you can show up on the leaderboard. Now, the next part that we're going to talk about is bad excuses. And yeah, these slides are about to get really wordy because the intent that I had whenever I was making these slideshows was that you can still just read it on your own time and you can still just take away from it without having to listen to me. Maybe I should have said it at the beginning, but oh well. Alright, so bad excuses. They allow us to cast aside our accountability, which is a really, really bad thing. Because whenever we cast aside accountability, we essentially give up control and we say, well, I mean, I couldn't do anything about it, so I guess I won't do anything about it. And granted, yeah, sometimes there are things that are worthy of complaint. Like, for example, maybe the Y-Stone timer from 4U, with it being extremely short. Or you have that one teammate who's constantly flash bombing the monster, so not only can you not see the screen, but the monster is now doing whatever random bullshit, but now you can't react to it because you can't see the screen because your teammate's constantly flashing everybody, or they're just flashing the Kezu, which has no effect. But we shouldn't rely on these excuses because when we start to create more excuses, they become a crutch that we lean on that hampers our growth. For example, the excuse that I sometimes accidentally use to myself is like, well, shit, I can't beat that run. It's on fucking PC. But the truth is, you can still beat the runs on PC. And anytime I use that excuse, I'm creating a crutch for myself to not push myself further. And the big thing is that sometimes we don't realize that we're making excuses. So we need to realize when we are. So next time you find yourself making an excuse, I want you to try and ask yourself why you are resorting to that excuse in the first place. And then ask yourself what you could do differently about that. So my example here is this monster's bullshit for comboing me into the wall. And then think to yourself what happened to allow the monster to combo you into the wall and how can you avoid that into the future. So that way another situation like that doesn't happen again. I guess one example would have to be Raytheon comboing you into the wall. Now, whenever she combos you into the wall, most common way to do that is you're up against the wall and she's doing her triple charge 3 times into you. Is that move annoying? Fuck yes. But you can still find your way out of it. Whether, well, actually, the one window that you have in between each charge is whenever you get knocked down to the ground and you still have a wire bug, whenever she stops moving for a split second to do her little turnaround, although she's just going to turn around more into the wall, that's your moment to wire bug out. So just a little heads up. And then lastly, bad excuses continue. And yeah, and again, kind of on the last slide, but sometimes things are out of your control, such as bad monster AI. But a big part with getting better is learning how to deal with unpredictable situations, and creating excuses for these situations will slow your growth for sure. Now, from what I remember, there was this scene from a Bruce Lee movie. I haven't seen the movie. I've only seen this tiny little scene, and I'm going to roughly paraphrase it. But he talks about practice, and the thing about practice is that when a lot of people practice, they'll practice the same scenario over and over again. So they only get used to that same scenario. So when something different happens, they're unable to deal with it. They become rigid. So it's important to be able to learn how to deal with these unpredictable situations. So that way you could become more like water. Be able to adapt to whatever situation is coming at you. Now, this is the Scrub Lord's Prayer, which is a little thing that came from Core A Gaming's video on the analysis, the effects of soul. So the Scrub Lord Prayer goes as show, if you haven't read it already. My controls weren't working, and if they were, you were playing dishonorably. And if you weren't, you were playing without skill. And if you were, it's not fun to play that way. And if it is, you only care about winning. And so let's go ahead to our bad excuses. And these are the bad excuses that I tend to see that prevent growth. And you can either see these as bad excuses or you can also see these as bad takes. So here's the first one. I can't beat a guy using a turbo controller. So here's the thing about bowgun runs. Frame perfect inputs doesn't matter as much as you think. Because before these frame perfect inputs even begin to matter in the first place, you need to worry about your aim positioning and your overall gameplay first. Because no amount of slightly faster clicking is going to make you lose 10, 20, 30 seconds. Because you keep missing your shots all over the place or you're constantly getting comboed. And then for those of y'all who are playing on PC, you do have auto clicker programs. Like if you're complaining that you can't beat a turbo, you can easily use a turbo yourself. And so there's no reason not to. And then top it off, Steam even has an option for you to actually select a turbo button, especially if you decide to use controller. So it's no excuse, especially if you're on PC. Like, I understand that not everyone wants to use a turbo controller, and I get that. However, you can't complain that somebody's using a turbo controller when you have access to the exact same tools that they have to. And then I talked to a bowgun runner about this, and they said that at best, having frame perfect inputs save you 1 second out of every approximately 80 seconds of gameplay. And the thing about using the bow guns is that a person can also semi-consistently get perfect inputs as well. And so it's not necessarily going to be saving 1 second every 80 seconds. That's only an approximate. And so 80 seconds, that's a minute and 20 seconds in a speed run. For a lot of light bowgun runs where they are about less than 2 minutes to less than 3 minutes 90% of the time, at best you're only saving 1 to 3 seconds in comparison to a non turbo run. So if you're finding that your time is more than 3 seconds, even 1.5 seconds, it's not because of turbo. You yourself have to get better. I promise you, it is not because of turbo. So the next one, I can't because I don't have a perfect charm. Yeah, perfect charms are nice to have, but again, like with the bowgun example, uh, the main thing that matters is your gameplay. At best, it can open up strategies and it can open up some options for you to utilize. Like, for example, if you had an extremely strong Candycraft charm, then you can use the Ludo Asia a lot more effectively. However, it's not something that you should worry about. As long as you have a half decent charm with some slots, then you'll be good. And then lastly, this run isn't impressive at all. With this weapon, you only spam this mechanic. Anyone can do it. I see this a lot with longsword runs, especially because with longsword runs, you do have a lot of people doing the counterattack. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read this slide. This excuse is very dismissive to the efforts required to perform at that level. While some weapons like longsword, light bowgun, and heavy bowgun have low skill floors to play the weapon, the skill ceilings for these weapons is amongst the highest in the game to push out every single piece of advantage as possible. And so this is a really, really big thing. People don't necessarily realize that because a weapon is very easy to use, it means that it's brain dead. And like I typed out, these weapons have amongst the highest skill ceilings in the game. And for this next paragraph, yeah, due to the appeal of those weapons, your competition is actually going to be extremely fierce because there's so many people using these. And because you have so many people using those weapons at once, it allows the weapon to be optimized extremely quickly. And so, as a result of that, with so many people optimizing out your strategies for what's good to use, it creates a situation where we get to the point where at the highest level, a lot of the runs are going to be looking the same, but what matters is how you execute them. However, you do have some weapons where pretty much almost no one is using it, and as a result of that, you don't see that same optimization nearly as quickly, such as Gunlance, which is, I'm pretty sure, the least popular weapon to use, and especially in the speedrunning sense, just because how weak it is. And so, because of how weak it is, nobody ends up using it, which means this weapon never gets optimized. So, for a lot of the Gunlance runs out there, you can probably find some sort of optimization if you decided to put the time into it. And my response to the thing where this isn't very impressive at all, with this weapon you only spam X mechanic, anyone can do it. Running's not hard. Anyone can do it. I mean, granted, if you lost your legs, and that's different. But for generally, running's not hard. Anyone can do it. And if that's the case, why are we praising Olympic athletes for running? I could run too. But of course, those guys have trained their asses off to get to the level where they can run at that speed. And that's the same thing with the highest level for longsword, light bowgun, and heavy bowgun users. They have trained their asses off to get to the highest point possible. And then lastly, this person's playing on PC. I can't beat a cheater. So it's bad to generalize the entire population of PC players because not every player is a cheater. So here's the thing: the majority of people who play the game on PC, they're typically playing it on casual. Generally, your hardcore players who are really really good make up a very very small facet of the entire community, and then if you looked at the speedrunning community in general, we probably make up like 0.001% of the entire player base. So just something to keep in mind. And generally, for people who do use mods, they're typically only using cosmetic mods to, unfortunately, make your boobies bigger, or maybe they actually got a badass suit to put on, or something along those lines. And then other people just use mods to improve quality of life. Like, for example, the Better Than Hanging mod or the Slow Mo Kill mod. That one's actually really badass. I love that one. Or just giving yourself extra materials just because you don't want to keep on relying on the Argosy for your great wet fish. So you just give yourself the wet fish. And then some just remove tedium. Like, for example, 100% food chance instead of having 70% food chance, or you have yourself your legal charm editing, and then sometimes health and spawn if you wanted to create a certain video. The ones who do use illegal mods like lower than HP, higher damage, and max skills on everything, these people are called out very very quickly, especially amongst the speedrunning community. Because the thing about speedrunning, especially on PC, is that before a run gets posted onto a board, it's got to be verified by somebody. Whether it's one person, two people, or multiple people. And so when it gets verified, it'll, of course, be published to the public so that everyone can look. And at that point, those runs are now at the mercy of being essentially like verified by the public on and checked for any cheats. So for example, let's just say a run gets posted into mhrspeedrun.com, it gets verified, and all of the SwitchX players sees the newest run. And so SwitchX players, knowing their SwitchX things, they see that something was off just slightly that the original verifier did not note. They'll call it out, and then the run gets removed pretty promptly, or we all just flame them in the comments section. So it's just something to keep in mind. Cheaters, or at least the extremely blatant cheaters, are called out very very quickly. Now obviously, whenever it comes to PC runs, people's definitions for cheating is very different. Some people would say that setting the health to the lowest legal value is cheating, and dealing with the random HP pools is a skill that you just gotta craft out. And that's a debate for another time. But just something to keep in mind though. Not everyone on PC is a cheater, and generally the runs that you see on the PC leaderboards are not cheated. Now the next thing I gotta say is quit comparing yourself to others. This is probably another big thing that prevents your growth. I mean, whose growth are you trying to track in the first place? Is it yours, or is it that other guy who's not you, Larry? I mean, after all, at the end of the day, you're the one holding the controller. Your mom's not behind you playing the controls with her arms around your neck and it's like, oh, there you go, Timmy. No, you're the one doing it. And besides, this is PvE, not PvP. It's just you and the monster, so it's your own performance you need to worry about, not Jimmy John's over there. And now, the next part is arrogance. At times, we can become arrogant in what we believe we are capable of. And it's very blinding. Nobody is immune to arrogance because it can happen to us every once in a while. And sometimes we think that we're just so good that it leads us to refuse to do anything that will shake that belief in ourselves. For me, sometimes I'll accidentally become arrogant. I'll think that I'm so good at whatever I do. But I'll then kind of refuse, whether subconsciously or not, to do certain things that would probably shake that belief that I am so good. And like this thing says, if something counters the belief that we're so skilled, then sometimes we'll create excuses to dismiss what happened. A common excuse is, well, this guy is playing on PC, so of course he did better than me because he's cheating, or he's using turbo, or he's got a god charm. When in reality, it's like we have to accept that we're not as good as we think we are. And this arrogance kind of needs to be in check. But I should note that it is good to be confident in yourself, because being confident in yourself can create a healthy esteem for you, and it's a good mindset to have whenever you are confident in yourself. It's whenever we become so overly confident, that's when it becomes a detriment to ourselves, and we would get in our own way. And then nextly, we have a fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset is the belief that ability is unchangeable. So wherever you're at, that's where you're always going to be at. It's also known as entity mindset. So a thing that I'll see in the comments is like, I'm not good enough because I'm bad at Monster Hunter, or I've always been bad at games. I can never reach that level. Oh man, I wish I was as good as this runner over here. If only I could be as good as this guy. I can never get to that level. And these people that you would sometimes see in the comments section, they've essentially put themselves in a fixed mindset. And the thing about fixed mindsets is that it kind of transforms our thought process into that our fate is set in stone, and whatever we do cannot work. So as a result, staying in a fixed mindset will never truly find successful improvements. And again, last part, this also extends to the people you look up to. If you find yourself saying that that they are so gifted at the game, you should probably stop. Because, I mean, yes, natural talent can help you out, but the most important thing for you to do is actual hard work and dedication. And generally, every single time you see a run, it is the culmination of long, long hours of grinding and training, and there is just a lot of time and dedication put into it in order to get to that level. It's not because of talent. And again, to kind of continue with the fixed mindset, to help combat it, it's important to begin thinking in ways that encourage growth. So, for example, and I'm going to use art as an example because very commonly with art, we'll have people, or a lot of people, say, man, this person's so talented at art, I can never do that. So instead of thinking this person draws well because they're talented, think this person draws well because of the effort that they have put in. Now, what happens is that with the former statement, it makes the act of drawing that is something innate. So in our gaming part, this person is such a god at Switch X because they are talented or whatever. This is just saying that this person is innately good, and something that is innate can't change. However, the latter part makes the act of drawing something that can be cultivated and grown. So this person has really good Switch X times because of the effort that they put in every single run. Again, effort would imply that they had to work to continue to grow it. Now, another thing that prevents people from really growing is having unclear goals. Now, it's good to have a goal because a goal can help direct us into what we need to do, and it gives us something to work towards. However, the problem with having an unclear goal is that if it's vague, it makes it really hard to gauge whether or not we're making progress, and as a result, it can really hamper us. So, a goal such as, I want to be better, well, that's bad because what is better? You never defined what better is to you. And as a result of it not being defined, it can't really be measured. For example, maybe one person's example of being better means not going into blue sharpness. Or maybe being better means being able to complete a hunt without using an item. Or maybe it means not carving. So, I mean, what's better? You have to define what's better. It has to be measured. So, for example, saying, I want to kill Raytheon without dying in under 4 minutes, that's a better goal because you can actually track that. Did you kill Raytheon in under 5 minutes or 4 minutes? No? Okay, then you try again. Oh, okay, this time I got closer. All right, do it again. This time I got closer again. And that can actually be measured and tracked. And then we also have fatigued. So just like working a very long day at work, there is such thing as playing for way too long. Long play sessions will leave us fatigued. So generally, the longer that we end up performing without taking a break, the worse that we'll end up doing. And not only that, but the thing about having really, really, really long play sessions is that our frustrations slowly build up over time. And if they're not released, it can cause us to tire out really, really quickly. And it can also cause us to just get even madder than we were before. So, as a result, take a break, take a breather, move around. After all, if you've been playing for, let's just say, 5 hours without using the restroom, you should probably use the restroom. And not only that, but getting up and moving around is healthy for you too, because it'll at least get your blood pumping. It'll help out your cardiovascular system. And it'll just help your physical health as well. Because your physical health is also being improved a bit, it'll also help your mental health. And then if it's nighttime, maybe it's time for bed. I mean, after all, sometimes we accidentally play till like 3 o'clock in the morning, so it's probably time to put the controller down and get to sleep. That one more run can happen later. Um, and besides, we need to take care of ourselves. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, then we're not setting ourselves up for success. Whatever we decide to define success as, of course. And we need an adequate amount of sleep for our daily functions as well. So by taking care of ourselves, get some sleep, get a little bit of exercise, take a break away from the game. It's okay to take a break. Because after all, there is such thing as too much practice, and too much practice usually comes in the form of fatigue. Now, I've gotten past some of the mental hurdles, but how can I begin to improve? So, we got our growth mindsets. Make sure you don't set unreasonable goals. Be willing to learn from failure. And definitely be willing to learn from others and how they manage to perform well. And then lastly, deliberate practice, and then we take a break. So let's go into these. Yeah, we're not done yet. So, what is a growth mindset? Now, I'm going to be taking this definition from my child development course. So, growth mindset is a belief that ability is changeable and it can be developed. It's known as incremental mindset, and it's generally seen as the opposite of your fixed mindset. Now, the nice thing about a growth mindset is that it can really push you to go even further. So, my example right here is like, I can't keep on going because this is my limit. That's your fixed mindset. Versus, I can keep pushing my limits even higher, or what can I do to keep pushing this? That would be an example of growth mindsets. And a growth mindset's really essential whenever you want to improve, because the thing about a growth mindset is that it keeps telling us that there is potential for more, and our abilities is not set in stone, which is extremely important. The next, don't set unreasonable goals. So if your goal is to get a faster time, averaging a very, very high time, let's just say, well, my example right here is you have 15 minutes on Great Azuchi. Don't make your first goal to be getting a world record, because that is just a recipe for burnout. Because you'll see that the first hunt you do, of course, that's your initial base. You're starting out with 15 minutes on Azuchi. And then your second hunt, you're still at 15 minutes on Azuchi, and you see that you got 14 more minutes to go to get to that world record on him, you're going to be pissed at yourself. Or you're going to get frustrated, especially as you don't get anywhere near your goal, and you'll just burn out. So, as a result, make your goals incremental. So, start with going from 15 to 14 minutes, and 13 minutes, and 12 minutes, and maybe you add in little extra optimizations here and there. Like, okay, maybe this time I will try to not use items. This time I will complete the hunt without using dogs, or whatever you want to make your goals to be. But remember, whenever it comes to these goals though, here's one advice that I have to give is make your goals contribute to you becoming consistent, because with consistency it allows you to keep on doing better. So again, with your grid Azuchi, if you're consistently at 15 minutes and you want to get down to 10 minutes, when you get down to 10 minutes, your next sub goal should be to get consistent at getting down to 10 minutes. Because once you become consistent at getting to 10 minutes, it allows you to push even further into 9 minutes, then 8 minutes, then 3 minutes. And next thing you know, you're consistent at getting under 3 minutes. You're consistent at getting under 2:30, consistent at 2:20, 2:10, 2 minutes. The next thing you know, you're in the sub 1 or sub 2 minute range, and you can actually start going for the world records because you've become consistently good at getting to that goal. Because otherwise, if you're always at 15 minutes and then you get a 2 minute run by fluke, you're going to get extremely pissed off the next time you play and you're at 15 minutes. So again, granted, that's just a bit of a wild logical extreme, but consistency is the most important thing to getting better for sure. So next thing is your willingness to learn from failure. So especially in American society, because I am an American, and maybe it was the places that I grew up as, but a lot of people will view failure as a bad thing and something to always be avoided. And kind of as a result of this, we end up trying to avoid taking risks or acting in ways that would probably cause us to fail. Well, that's a problem because whenever we're trying to get better, we're going to have to start doing things in ways that we're probably not familiar with. So, as a result of that, you're going to have a period of high failure. So, let's just say, for example, you wanted to get better at using gun lance. Um, and you've never used gun lance before. And let's just pretend you have a 90% success rate whenever you use switch axe. Obviously, you're going to be doing something very, very new whenever you use gun lance, and as a result, your success rate with gun lance would probably look like, let's just say, 30%. Obviously, that's going to be frustrating. You're going to see that you're not doing well because you only succeed 30% of the time, so you'll just end up putting down the gun lance and go back to switch axe because you're so tired of failing. And you never truly figured out what was causing you to fail in the first place. So that's just something to keep in mind. Whenever we try something new, you can always expect a period of higher amounts of failure. But once we get past that transitional period, while we practice, then we can begin to really examine like what's going on, what's causing us to fail, what's causing us to succeed, what can we do better, and then eventually we get to that point to where we just start succeeding more and more and more. Kind of like in the picture that I have right there, where the guy ends up putting in just a chemical because he doesn't know that because, he's experimenting. And then it blows up in his face, and then instead of just quitting and then going back to a different thing, he just thinks to himself, okay, what could be done differently? He figures out what could be done differently, and it succeeds. But, of course, we got to get through this period of failure first, which will happen, and we should not be afraid of failure. Try something new. I promise me, you'll be surprised at how much better you'll eventually get if you don't stray away from the fear of failing. And then this is a big one: willingness to learn from others. So a very important thing about learning is that, as people would say, we learn from or we get our success from the shoulders of other giants. So we learn from the people before us. And the nice thing about learning from the people before us is that we can see what they're doing that goes so well. So we can skip parts of that failure phase where we're trying to experiment with what works by observing somebody who already knows what works. And then once we replicate them and then get better at that, then we can see that we would improve at a much faster rate as opposed to trying to get better without actually observing that guy. So, if you're observing a good player, think about what they're doing. What's allowing them to do so well? What's their positioning? What's their opening? What's their timing whenever they perform their moves? Because sometimes, if you notice, like especially on greatsword runs, some greatsword users will delay when they actually do their strong charge moves to make sure that they actually hit the right spot instead of just trying to spam uh, their hits all the time. Like what micro actions are they doing? You could definitely see this with the bowgun runs. Like, are they slightly adjusting their angles constantly? Are they quickly shifting through their ammo types? And how fast are they shifting through their ammo types? Excuse me. When are they crafting? Just things like that. And then if you're observing somebody who's constantly carding, like let's just say you're observing your favorite streamer who likes to get mad a lot, well, what's making them so mad? What are they doing that's making them perform so poorly? Just something to think about. And then, of course, do not be afraid to ask questions. Just never be afraid to ask questions. Many people are willing to ask any questions that you might have, within reason, of course. I mean, like, I'm not just going to give you my credit card number or my social security. Like, ask a reasonable question. But, that being said, if you're watching a speedrun video, don't just ask what armor or weapon they used unless it's actually not shown in the video. Because here's the thing, in speedruns, for them to even be verified in the first place, we always show the armor either at the beginning of the video or at the very end of the video, always. And that's because this is extremely important to make sure that nobody's actually cheating. But granted, of course, even though now that I'm actually saying it out loud, I realize like that's probably something that not a lot of people are aware of, but that's because you haven't watched the full video, so please do watch the full video. Or usually if you're trying to look for a set to make, a speedrun's not a bad place to start. Just skip to the end of the video and you'll see what you need. And then of course if it's in a different language, then thankfully with Rise things are kind of color coded. So it's just kind of go based off of your color coding and what you know about the game. So like if you see that the thing is red with 7 slots in it, it's probably attack boost 7. Now the next thing is deliberate practice. When you practice, you have to be mindful of what you are doing. This is something that I stress a lot in the middle of my streams. So the difference between two people who have 1,000 hours in the game depends on how they use your 1,000 hours. I mean, after all, let's just say the first person with 1,000 hours, they just play the game going through the motions. They don't really think about what they're doing. They just do whatever. Versus the second person with 1,000 hours, they play through the game and they set up little goals for themselves. Like, for example, I will make sure to land all my soaring wyvern blades on the face, or I will make sure to do the hunt using as little items as possible. Or let's just say the focus of their goal that time is to complete a hunt using only axe mode. You could probably guess as to which person is going to get better within those 1,000 hours. It's probably going to be the second guy. And of course, my example here is 2 people are drawing at the same skill level and are told to draw to improve. That's it. Just told to draw to improve. So the first person just draws the first thing that comes to the mind. Second person begins to draw the first thing that comes to mind, but they end up focusing on their shading techniques. So because of those goals, the second person is going to see faster improvements in their technique. And another thing that can definitely help out whenever you are trying to deliberately practice is to make sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then if you have another person who is better at the game than you, then have them take a look at it and see what they say. And yeah, and it's also important to recognize what good technique is because it is possible to accidentally practice bad technique. One example for this is, let's just say if you're playing Greatsword, an example of bad technique is constantly using moves that don't contribute to your charge. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. Bad technique for Greatsword is never, ever, 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 ever charging your Greatsword. That's bad technique, and you're going to have to unlearn that before you begin practicing your good techniques. So, and again, one way to seek out or to ensure that you're practicing good techniques, seek out someone who's familiar with the technique or at least familiar with the range of things that you want to practice and ask them to observe you or ask them for tips so that way they can catch what you're doing or you can at least have some sort of an idea on what you need to be doing to get better. And so, yeah, here's some 5 principles of deliberate practice. So first is that you're going to want to try and push beyond your comfort zone. So obviously, like I said in the failure slide, you're going to be doing something different. And so as a result, it's going to feel uncomfortable for a little while. But if you have little goals, then that'll at least set up a direction for you to go through. And then focus on what you're doing while you're doing these goals. And then hopefully you have somebody who's better than you. And the reason why I emphasize someone who's better than you is because if you just ask, let's just say, you ask your little brother who only plays Pokemon what you're doing wrong, he might not be able to give you quality feedback because he's never played Monster Hunter or he's never played whatever game you're currently playing before. So make sure you actually ask somebody who knows what they're actually doing. You need that high quality feedback, whether it's developing the high quality feedback for yourself. Like, for example, we all know what a bad movie looks like. But if we have somebody who's more skilled, they can tell us why that movie is so bad. And then in this case, they can tell us why what we're doing might be wrong or what we're doing could be right. So something to keep in mind. And then lastly is develop a mental model of expertise. So in your head, think about what an expert would look like whenever you're doing something. So, for example, if I'm thinking of Greatsword, I'm going to be thinking of CT, who's a Greatsword user. And I'm going to be thinking about how they're positioning themselves. In fact, in my head right now, I'm thinking about their Xenogar run that I watched last night on how they were very patient in actually using their Rage Slash. They ensured that they weren't just spamming it out of just because they could. They were deliberately using charge tackles on occasion to make sure that A, not only were they not getting knocked back by Xenogar's little Paul Slam, so but also B, he also managed to aim his shoulder tackles to where they would hit the head so that it would build up to a KO until later into the hunt. He also occasionally delayed himself with actually using the level 3 Rage Slash to make sure that he actually hits the head. He wasn't just spamming wirebug moves here and there. Just little things like that to keep in mind. And that's my little mental model of like how an expert at Greatsword would look. And then here's another thing. Take a break. It's alright to take a break. I mean, after all, like I was saying earlier, there is such thing as too much practice. So it's good to take a break. Because if you're not taking time off, then you're going to find yourself being pretty burned out. And burnout is definitely a recipe for not improving, which will lead to even more burnout because you see that you're not improving. So go outside, go for a walk, do some squats, talk to a loved one. I mean, after all, it's important to take care of yourself, and everything that you have should not be neglected for a game. And not only that, but just taking a break will give your mind some time to process what you did. So that way you can incorporate it into your processes better, or make yourself better in general, is what I'm trying to say. So again, do not be afraid to take a break. A lot of runners take breaks because, after all, we get burned out doing the same thing over and over and over again. My big break recently has been playing Elden Ring, for example, and honestly, that was the break that I needed before I really got back into speedrunning again. Um, I guess right now I'm kind of on a little micro break because I'm trying to grind my character back up for Monster Hunter Rise on PC. So heads up, I'm doing some PC runs pretty soon. So yeah. And then me personally, I didn't add this before. This was kind of an afterthought, but find yourself a rival. Sometimes rivalries can get things to be really, really fun because sometimes it's just fun to compete with other people. And a good rivalry will typically be one where you and the other person are constantly pushing themselves to become even better than before. That being said, whenever it comes to finding a rival, don't be a jackass to them. I mean, after all, they're not going to be your rival for long if you're just going to constantly demean them or like talk shit about them. So yeah. So shit talk is fun sometimes, but just be mindful about it. And then that's the end. So again, thank you to everyone who helped out with this presentation. Most importantly, thank you to my wife, Kat, as always, for being there for me and for constantly encouraging me and constantly encouraging me to push myself and to just pursue doing these. Without her, none of this would be possible, and that's an absolute certainty. So thank you, love. And then nextly, thank you to Fox Invictus, Sarisa, Dayaga, Zook, CT, and many, many, many other people that I would consider as rivals at some point. I swear to God, if it wasn't for y'all guys, I would not have gotten as far as I would have in my speedrunning career. And also, thank you to all the runners at Team Elixir Discord for providing super valuable feedback, for providing your ideas. Also, thank you to all my bros at the Night Owls Discord. Y'all guys are my homies. Y'all always have my back. And I know I'm not always there for sure because I'm doing whatever. But just know that I have y'all's back as well. And also, again, thank you to Strawberry Shortcake for always for always asking questions to understand the stuff that's going on under the hood for various runs. So again, without all you guys, none of this would be possible and this video wouldn't exist today. Oh, and unfortunately, I forgot to put it in here, but also thank you to all my buddies at the speedrun.com Discord for also providing valuable feedback. If it wasn't for y'all guys as well, then this thing wouldn't be as refined, for sure. So with that case, thank you guys very much for showing for this lecture, or not lecture. I like to call them lectures, but at least to this TED Talk. And I hope y'all guys have a wonderful day today. I'll see y'all guys next time, the next discussion. Later.